Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. We'll be diving right in. On our earlier phone-in segment, we highlighted the deep concerns Nigerians have about education and its safety. Now we turn to a critical discussion on the Safe School Initiative, the federal government's flagship program designed to protect students, teachers and schools from the growing menace of kidnappings and attacks. Now, despite the program, recent events reveal alarming gaps from the abduction of 25 schoolgirls in Kebbi State to over 300 students and teachers kidnapped in Niger State, and the wave of school closures sweeping across Kebbi, Katsina, Yobe, Niger, Plateau and other states. Now, it is clear that the initiative is struggling to meet its objectives. These closures, while intended to safeguard students, also disrupt learning, widen educational gaps, and leave communities anxious and uncertain. Now, reports also show that even when some students escape captivity, as happened recently in Niger State, with the help from local farmers, hundreds remain at risk, highlighting persistent vulnerabilities in the system. Now, this morning, we'll examine why the Safe School Initiative is failing in some areas, what are the structural weaknesses, and how can security measures be strengthened to protect children without halting education. Now, to help us analyze these challenges, we are joined by two distinguished guests. Wing Commander Musa Salamanu, retired, a renowned security expert and public commentator right here in our studios. And joining us via Zoom from Kaduna is Professor Tukur Muhammad Baba, the National Publicity Secretary of the Hauwa Consultative Forum. Professor Baba is a seasoned academic as well. We'll be unpacking the gaps, explore growing security challenges, and discuss practical solutions to make schools a safe place for every Nigerian child. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us right here on Daybreak.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Now, looking at what has happened in the past week and just this morning as well, we've seen that 13 teenage girls have been abducted in Borno State. Those aside are not schoolgirls, even though they are schoolgirls, but not abducted in school. And looking at the past, the history of what has happened when it comes to abductions of, schoolgirls in Nigeria, we've seen Chibok, we've seen Dopti, and some cases around the country as well. So despite, at this point, billions allocated to, security and the Safe School Initiative, attacks have now become so persistent. So what specific gaps do you think Nigeria's security architecture makes schools so soft or a soft target at this point?
Well, so thank you so much for having me. Like you clearly said, schools are a soft target. So it's, in asymmetric warfare as we're having here, or in terms of with bandits, the major target are soft targets. So that the whole idea is to instill fear, is to show vulnerability and to show the incapacity of the state to protect its citizens. So the best targets for such people is to look at targets that will, one, are vulnerable and they are not very protected, but that will also give the oxygen that these groups want. And the oxygen is always the issue of how far and wide their actions could go, how much confusion and how much fear it instills in both the populace and even in government sectors. So you see, the first thing is, the test was the Chibok girls. With Chibok girls came a lot of publicity, a lot of outrage, a lot of international condemnation and efforts towards that. So it signaled, or it's that this is an effective strategy. And with that, since then, we've had so many kidnaps. And in any of those kidnaps, the pattern has been the same. There's going to be outrage, there's going to be condemnation, there's going to be, all sorts of things. Then the response will be varied from one time to the other and until it dies down. So when they see they're getting out of that energy, which is the publicity that they need, so they go for the next kidnap, mass kidnap, because parents will be involved, communities will be involved, governments at all levels will be involved, and even the international media will be involved, and international organizations. Now, so the question is, why do we keep having a repeat of this? What is happening? What does it point at? What it points at is that despite various declarations, despite various initiatives, which came almost, it started before the Chibok girls in 2014, but gained that lots of buy-in and a lot of so on with the government thereafter, and there were so many groups and so many units that were set up. But what you see in that is in the implementation, there is a bit of lack of coordination everywhere. You find out that the Federal Ministry of Education has its own part that it's doing in terms of then the funding you're talking about, sometimes the Ministry of Finance. Then you're talking about coordination with Ministry of Budget and National Planning. That's even when you go down also, you start to see which are even the implementing agencies. Is it the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps? Is it the Nigerian military? Is it the Nigerian police itself? Each of these agencies kind of trying to show that it's doing something. But at the end of the day, we have to look at how is this connected to the school on the ground? Because it's all about kind of effort between the government, the school communities, or the school itself, and the communities to ensure that there is prevention, there is preparedness to ensure that this does not happen. And when it happens, there's effective response and recovery. Now, we've seen all through this that there are gaps in this implementation. So you hear about budgetary allocations. I don't want to go there because it's one thing to budget something and another to...
Before you let us turn our attention to Professor Tukur Muhammad Baba. Thank you for joining us on Daybreak. I don't know if he can hear us.
Hello, Professor Baba. Can you hear us?
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
Good morning.
All right.
Thank you for joining us.
I can hear you.
Thank you for
Can you hear me? I can hear you.
All right. So before
I can hear you.
We move ahead, as someone that's a seasoned academic and educationist, at this point, we'll have to look at, the impact of this insecurity on education, with schools now being shut down by the federal government. How do you think it is going to affect literacy rates, gender enrollment, as well as future workforce development at this point? Because having schools shut down in the middle of the school year would have immense effect on it. So how do you think this would affect education in the long run?
Oh, it will impact education very negatively. You see, back in 2023, with the adoption of students from the Federal University, Gusau, ACF raised the alarm that this is going to have a very devastating effect because we are dealing with a population that did not have adequate and still does not have adequate access to education, number one. Number two, we have a population that is still skeptical about uptaking education. And so when these kind of negative things happen that dampen the spirit, frighten life out of parents and students alike, the teachers and so on, it's telling them go home, go away from school rather than go to school. It's devastating because, like we said, the areas are already disadvantaged, in highly vulnerable protection. Furthermore, aptitudinal structures did not take into consideration security. That is to say, kidnappings are new. So in the past, we were complacent because the problem was not there. But now that it's there, staring it in the face, it's dampening education, especially in areas that need it, i.e. the rural areas. Oh, the urban schools are fairly protected because urban areas anyway have concentration of security.
All right, I think Professor Baba is having a bit of a network issue. So let's come back to our guest in the studio. So now let's talk about the early warning signs, which communities will always say that, these alerts were there. I remembered when we spoke to one of the secretary at Zuri Emirates. That was on Friday. He stated that the alerts were there, but then 45 minutes to when this attack was being carried out, the soldiers were pulled out from that particular school in which, you know, those children were being abducted. So why is it that these alerts are there, but at the end of the day, we don't have... I always say it that getting this information is not the problem for Nigeria. The problem is the capacity and the coordination in which we are meant to, you know, carry out in ensuring that these attacks don't happen, because we have seen these attacks happen year in, year out. So why is it that, you know, our security agencies don't yield to these alerts at the end of the day? Where is the gap coming from?
So you spoke about something. First of all, I don't want to delve into if the community there was this alert or not, or the information get. But generally, what happens is that commanders on the ground are actually struggling between ensuring that there are so many reports coming in. You can imagine if you're a commander on the ground and you have a particular number of troops, and you have so wide an area which to cover, critical infrastructure and so on and so forth to cover. So you have to prioritize where to man and where at a particular time. Now, if you have a security report that something is likely to happen, and that may be credible, you're going through all your intelligence and so on. Now, while you're positioning your troops in a particular place or ensuring that they are manned in one, you get, so that is anticipated, right? Now, you might get a call about something that is already happening right now. Now, so you are torn between, do I wait for this that is likely to happen, or do I move swiftly to respond to what is already happening? So, and that could be a diversionary measure. Maybe they strike a community somewhere, and it's the call, there's a call for SOS and so on and so forth. When you move, but this is their real target. So it goes to one thing that we've always been talking, which is numbers. In times of this types of emergency and in response, numbers mean so much. You could use technology, you could use everything, but these are only additions to numbers. If you don't have enough numbers that could physically occupy those spaces, that means you have to be shifting or moving your troops or your assets from one theater to the other, from one location to the other. And remember that the adversary is watching. They are watching, they know where you're concentrating, and so on and so forth. So it goes to say that until we're able to look at the issues of numbers, until we're able to look at the issues of all of government or all of society efforts that we are likely to have in these areas, like he rightly mentioned, areas whereby the schools are outside or outskirts of the communities and so on. So it goes to say that it's also very important that we look at where we site some of these schools, right from when you're building the schools, when you are siting. What is the support system that is around there? And from time to time, have you assessed those facilities? Have you assessed the environment? Have you, what? So this is continuous. It's not something that, okay, we did it in 2021, for example, then our schools are safe. No, it's continuous. It has to be done. We have to increase number. We have to improve our coordination, and all this in support of, or with the support of, technology that we talk about. Okay,
so let me follow up. Sorry, Jay. I wanted to ask him because he kept talking about numbers. Yes. And so I would love to hear from you, what is the minimum safety standard every school should have when it comes to, you know, this security personnel that are supposed to be on ground?
So it's difficult to say this is the number or this is what a security or a school should have. But let's use let's say in terms of emergency, they say for troops, for example, 25 per 1,000, for example. Now, if you have that number of troops, and I think the UN also has a particular number for, I can't remember that offhand now, for policing. Now, if we look at all that, we look at the situation that we are having, we have a dire need of numbers. If we are talking about, we have a population of 250, 60, 70. Well, let's say 270. Now, if you have that and you have a military that is less than 250, you have if you put all together, less than 300 or 400, including everyone, then you find out that we are far inadequate numbers that cannot cover the space. And if you look at the situation that we have, whereby we have challenges, at least when you look at the north, northwest, northeast, north central, you're not talking of the southern part of the country, each with its own peculiar challenge.
Absolutely.
So you find out that you can't but help but to say that you need these numbers. I'm happy that the president, through I saw the press release, saying that police should leave those VIP protection duties and come and add to the numbers. That is not enough, but that is a good step if it is implemented, because this is not the first time we're hearing this.
All right. Before we move on to Professor Baba, I wanted to ask a question. You made mention of how it's quite impossible for for them to get an intel and then be shifting the, should I say,
attention,
troops, from one place to the other. But then what happens after the fact? The response when it comes to trying to recover those girls or those that have been kidnapped?
So this is where the enablers come in. This is where, for example, if you want to prevent an occurrence. Now, if it happens, the next most important thing, how do you respond? Now, this is where also we talk about the issue of the technology you're talking about, the issue of mobility, the ability, the training, and that is available, and still the number of people that you are able to push out there. Because let's assume they came and they are likely, when they kidnap in mass, they are likely not to go in the same direction. They are likely, immediately that happens, they are likely to go in very separate directions, because it will be foolhardy of them to go in one direction. One, it clears, it raises a lot of, wherever you see so many vehicles passing, you know there's something wrong with the air. I mean, so it gives all those clues. So they're likely to go to disperse immediately. So what that means is that you are likely to be following different tips at the same time. So that brings about the issue of, you need, even in that numbers, you need the technology that could have a higher view, that can cover a higher, radius at the same time. So response truly has always been very slow and very weak. So that's why you find out that in the first 48 hours, that is very, very important, because that's when, before they settle to where they are going to, they must have planned where they are taking this, and so on and so forth. So while they are moving, before they get there, that's the best time to interdict and so on.
All right. Now, Professor Baba, if you're with us, looking at, at this point, looking at the north.
Yes, I am.
Yes. All right, now looking at the north and having an understanding that it is quite important to have education, especially with the risk of creating the lost generation, as we might say, particularly in the north. Many parents are now going to be too afraid to send their children to school. What strategies do you think can rebuild trust between schools and communities as well, making sure that parents can agree to let their children go to school without allowing, children be out of school and becoming the lost generation?
Hello, Professor Baba, are you there? Okay.
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Like I said, I think the best strategy would be preparedness. We can talk about numbers, but we know that it is almost impossible to have the adequate numbers of security personnel to protect vulnerable communities. Even the urban areas do not have enough. Now, the best thing would be, I think, to have an early warning, early response, community-based. You see, one of the problems that we have have is that the insecurity, including that so many people within and so on, as logistics. A lot of people have made abductions. A business. So what we need, I think, it's a situation where communities will be empowered, will be trained, and frequently assessed with certain measures that will ensure that they know in advance these things are coming and that they can do something before the security forces come in. Physical arrangement of facilities and so on. Communities face these bandits, and of course, we have to have measures that will help them at least identify vulnerabilities and take measures in advance before the authorities come in. Are we going to have enough security personnel to cover all schools? No. Then the next thing is to deal with the wider picture itself, the whole concept of insecurity, terrorism, banditry, and so on. And school abduction is just one symptom out of the bigger picture. So let's deal with the insecurity. Let's deal with the factors that fuel insecurity. And within that, then we can have special arrangement for especially vulnerable populations, such as school children, innocent, happy-go-lucky, and of course attractive to the bandits. So I would rather see a situation where from all these highly publicized pronouncements by government, I think we should return to the communities so that they are trained to see what they can do within their own local resources, low cost but effective. I think this would be more reasonable under the current circumstances, because of course to recruit, train, adequate number and adequate is a highly relative. The basic is the very measure we take in our houses. We take certain schools, the communities, and so on should also be empowered.
Okay,
All
I think
right.
please go ahead.
We'll be turning back to our security expert right here. Now, looking at all the gaps that we do have, what is one non-negotiable that you think should be put through when it comes to insecurity in Nigeria, especially the escalation that we're seeing at this point? Because it's becoming too much and it seems not enough is being done at this point.
Well, it's so difficult to point at one, kind of magic bullet and say if this is done, it's going to solve all the problems that we have. But we could look at range of activities or range of issues that could be looked at. First of all, we allowed this to fester for too long. And so when something gets so bad, it's so difficult, it's likely to look overwhelming. So the most important thing, I think, is to accept that we have this challenge and to kind of go back to the drawing board, because we've been having, like he rightly said, these issues of insecurity manifesting in so many different aspects, starting from 2009 up to today, with Boko Haram, then going to the Northwest, with all manifesting in different ways. We cannot overlook the root causes of this. And they have to do with grievances, that they have to do with structural issues and so on and so forth. But they have to be done concurrently. So in a way, you have to kind of go offensive through kinetic means to ensure that you bring these issues to a manageable level. But at the same time, as you're doing that, you're following up with issues that have to do with human security. Human security in terms of how well are people being taken care of? How do people feel part of the social contract that says that you kind of, the state is to take care of your welfare and so on and well-being of its citizens. So as you're doing that, as the forces are fighting, the security forces trying to push out this element, neutralizing them, the state itself is following up with some of this access roads, hospitals, presence, mere presence, and ensuring that the legal system is also very effective in a way that those that have the highest responsibility, the leadership, are not in any way just let to go or kind of brought to sit to talk. That what I mean is that they must bear some level of responsibility in terms of making sure that these people are brought to justice, and it is seen by everyone that it does not pay to go this way. So if we do all this, and with the other physical security issues that we're talking about, that's in terms of ensuring mobility, like he said, if there's the early warning becomes effective very well when there's response. You could say, you could tell the reports, you could do everything, but when there is no effective response, it comes to naught. And very soon people start feeling that, why should we say when we don't feel that?
So you're saying the federal government has to be proactive and has to do a total overhaul of the system in itself.
So I had saying a particular, it's a whole of society approach. Yes, federal government having the highest responsibility, state governments, local government, communities, and everybody. Now, for example, when communities get involved in planning prevention, taking preventive measures, in ensuring that when they hear something, they say something. When there is something likely happening, there are issues. Like you said, even in our homes, we ensure that there's, say, padlocks, all these things that could delay the intruder before help comes around. So everybody has a role to play in this. But the federal government, of course, or the governments at all levels have the highest responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is ability to respond, there is the numbers, there is the technology, there is the adequate funding, and the awareness is created in a way that communities know that they can be active participants in preventing this before it happens. And that when it happens, they are also very important in recovery. That means it's enough. Time has gone that we talk Abuja-based talks or capitals. You have to go down to where these things are happening and ensure that there is that confidence is returned back to people, and they are able to feel that they are secured, they are protected, and enlighten them to know that they could also do something about their own safety.
All right. Talking about the collective responsibility of everyone when it comes to security matters, and that is why we need to also look at accountability concerning the funds that is being donated, or should I donated and pushed into the Safe School initiative, right? Are schools actually implementing them, or is compliance mostly on paper? Because when you look at this figure, right from when this initiative was being implemented, and then during late President Buhari's tenure, a lot of funds, I think 15 billion naira was being pushed into this particular initiative. But at the end of the day, when you look at the schools, most especially in rural areas, trust me, when you go to the schools, you get to find out that the Megadi guiding that school is an elderly man with no weapon, nothing for him to use at the end of the day. And then we don't have surveillance cameras in our schools. No fences. If you look at the schools in those rural areas, the fences are nothing to write home about. So where are these funds going to? Who should we hold accountable when it comes to the funds that is being allocated to that initiative?
So the people that have the highest responsibility for oversight at the National Assembly, they are the representatives of the people. So they should, if there are funds that have been budgeted for something, there should be that oversight. Where did these funds go to? Have they been judiciously used? But if you go back to like what we see physically, that it seems that First of all, 15 billion, yes, it sounds very big, but if you look at the myriad of issues that is meant to solve, it's not much. However, it's when the 15 billion is judiciously used that people will be encouraged, because there were private entities, there were government, budgets and so on and so forth contributing to that. It's when it's judiciously used that there will be that encouragement to do more. Now, it's obvious if you go to physically on the ground, just like you highlighted, not just in communities, not just in rural areas, go to even urban centers. If there are government schools, a lot of them are not fenced. A lot of them lack the basic, those, we talk about preventive measures. A lot of them are not assessed in terms of security and all these basic issues provided. So what it shows, without going into the details, is that perhaps there is misapplication of those funds, or maybe lack of coordination in terms of identifying what are the most urgent needs in terms of how do you get that. And even the things that have to, because the Safe School Declaration also talked about community involvement, like he said. Are we training the community school groups? There's a name that they call, I think, community management groups also, or school management groups. How engaged are they? How involved is the community, and so on and so forth.
All right. Now, quickly, before we go, in just a few seconds, if you can, at this point, do you think that state governments are held accountable for what is going on at this point, or they're not put in the scope of accountability as well?
Well, the simple answer is no. But if I will have to expand it, is that I feel the state government, if you look at most of these kidnaps, they happen at the secondary and primary school level, where the state government has the larger responsibility. If you look at this, some of these buildings where the primary education is usually state education suburbs around, and so on and so forth. So yes, and we have heard from even UBEC, that's the Universal Basic Education Commission, that some states do not even bring about their counterpart funding to be able to access those funds that are available for these schools. So now, state governments have a lot of responsibility in this. You clearly hear that they are just what do they call it? Security. They are the chief security officers in name, but it's not so. The fact is that, like I said earlier on, when you do kinetic means using these security forces, the state, when I say state here, both federal, state, and local government have a responsibility to ensure that those basic issues are taken care of. Like I said, rural roads, the markets, to ensure that people are able to get back on their feet and get means of livelihood, the basic hospitals to ensure that people know that their health is being taken care of, those facilities in schools to ensure that there is at least perimeter fencing, there's the guards that you're talking about, that there's the community or the school management committees, and so on and so forth. Those are responsibilities at the state and local levels. That if we hold the state and the local level more effectively, I assure you that we are going to get at least some of these things solved at the rural level.
All right. Thank you very much, Wing Commander Musa Salamanu, retired, for shedding so much light on ways to tackle these issues from a security perspective. And thank you so much, Professor Tukur Muhammad Baba, for giving us more on how it's supposed to be tackled when it comes to the education point of view.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.